All right, welcome to Real Assets Weekly, episode number 10. This is Ebert Capital, and up here on the Lost Coast of California. And I'm here with Tristan Caswell. He's an analyst at Ebert Capital. We're going to talk about timber stocks, going to talk about real assets, have fun. It'll be our first Real Assets Weekly. We recorded live at the bar. So with that, Tristan, what's up, man? Thanks for hanging out.
Hey, thanks for having me, Andrew. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate being on. I've never actually been on a podcast before, so this will be something new to me.
Good, man. Yeah, so the Tristan I know from, we're actually on the Student Managed Investment Fund back at institutions of higher learning back in the day in college. And that's where I know him from originally. And we're both in the industry, stayed in touch. And one thing that's really interesting about Tristan, it's funny kind of where the interests overlap is here at Swami Research. We're interested in lumber stocks and timber and kind of their tie-ins with housing and with real estate. And so it's something I've been, paying a lot of attention to and reading about. And Tristan is a woodworker, and he's also an analyst that works at an RIA, Ebert Capital here in Eureka, California. And but in his spare time, as a hobby, he's a woodworker. So tell us a little bit about that. How did what got you interested originally in working with wood and timber stocks?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. It's one of those things. It's how do hobbies develop? I mean, the first thing I did was built a shelf. Really liked doing that. The structural part of it didn't look quite right, of course, because it was the first thing I built. And then I decided to take a class in woodworking at College of the Redwoods up here, and got to use some really fancy, really high-end machinery, which helped me learn how to do woodworking professionally. And I'm definitely not a professional woodworker. I'm an amateur woodworker, but I have a lot of interest in the business, and I've learned a lot through watching YouTube videos and other methods of learning about the industry. And I've learned basically that one of the things that is most important, I think, in the industry is where you're getting your wood and what the wood type of products are. And I've been investigating engineered wood, which is the future of, I would say, the building industry. Whereas now the commodities wood-based products, you're probably going to find them more in cabinets and that sort of thing. So it's going to change the whole supply chain of where things are going to be going into the market and how the wood is going to get turned into structural products. I find that pretty fascinating.
I love it. Getting right into it. So that's probably a great place to start off. So engineered wood, tell us. That's something that it's you read the research reports, you see that term thrown around a lot. Maybe just from a high level, break down engineered wood for us a little bit. What's the history of it, and what does that exactly mean? What does it roughly mean?
So when you take a piece of wood and you cut it into dimensions, let's say a 1 foot by 3 foot, you end up getting some changes in the wood over time as it's exposed to moisture. You end up getting what's called warping. I'm sure most people are familiar with that term. You get your floorboards or something, and then all of a sudden they don't fit together because they're warped because they've moved. And so the reason why it's doing that is because wood will move across the grain. It'll actually expand, but it won't expand with the grain. So it's impossible for wood to warp in a longer direction, but it can warp in short ways. So what engineered wood does is it takes different grain directions and it glues them together in a hodgepodge of different directions so that the wood isn't pulling apart in one direction or the other, and it stabilizes it. And it also frees it of any defects and makes it 100% guaranteed to last through certain conditions. Whereas commodity products, you build your house out of them, they can move. You end up checking out an old wall that's been built in the house, and you can actually see some warping in the 2x4s. So it's a new product that's going to really help architects design giant skyscrapers out of wood and things like that.
That's really cool. I've seen people. I've seen this on Vintwit. People talking about this. So basically, okay, just zoom back out. So a regular 2x4 made out of what? Maybe even start here. So what? Most wood in the United States, most homes are built out of what types of wood?
So framing wood is spruce, pine, and fir, SPF. That's what it's generally called.
And that's 3 different species?
3 different species. Mainly, Doug fir is probably the one people are most familiar with. It's got the most application. Spruce is also a great wood, however, it's a little harder to find outside of the West Coast. So you're generally going to find a lot of Doug fir. And so those are the 3 main types of products you're going to find in framing. And in engineered wood, you'll find these exact same types of wood products, but in a form of an I-beam or some other form of engineered wood. And yeah, it's commodities now are essentially the cost basis for these fully engineered products.
So, okay, break that down. So commodities are the cost basis because essentially an engineered wood you're explaining earlier is like it's so OSB is start here. OSB is what we think of as plywood, right? Or is that
it's a type of plywood? Yeah.
It's a type of plywood.
Yeah, it's oriented strand board, so different strands of wood are then glued together in different directions, and that does give it some geometric stability. But it's very porous, so if it gets wet, it basically destroys it.
And that goes on siding, and that's like generally used not as a structural beam, but as siding.
Siding is something that goes on your weatherproofing.
Yeah.
But before you get to your siding.
Okay, right. And then, so traditional single-family homes, SFRs, are built from 2x4s and 4x4s and stuff of SPF, of spruce and pine.
100% correct, yeah.
Right, okay. And then, but skyscrapers and such, and like these big multi-story buildings, like multi-family homes, is that fair?
Well, multifamily would be like, duplex or I'm thinking more like the giant skyscrapers typically would be made out of steel, glass, and concrete. So up until this point, they haven't used wood traditionally, unless it was a very old building.
Right. Okay, but now you're seeing a transition to this engineered wood.
Definitely, and you see it in giant skyscrapers. A lot of what they're doing, they'll build a steel facade around the outside, and then the interior will be all made of engineered wood. And so it's a way of really brightening up the lobby, or brightening up the spaces inside the building.
That's cool. And so so let's talk about the West Coast, or even we can talk about Northern California. So here, the types of wood that's grown is there's redwood, obviously.
Yeah, redwood's a wonderful type of wood if you have access to it for building.
Right. Like tip. So for those North Coasters in our audience base, that was a really interesting tip we were talking about before we were rolling here, is the only real way to get your hands on old growth redwood is if your neighbor's is cutting down a tree they have on their property.
That's right, yeah.
Right. So other than that, you can't, and that's one of the best. I've heard of people like salvaging it from tear down, like old growth redwood is.
That's exactly what they do, and that's got to boil down to the laws in California. I don't know exactly when these came into place, but essentially you can't cut down a redwood with a diameter of 24 inches in trunk or more, and that protects the forest from being logged, the old growth forest from being logged.
Right.
But essentially then it means that, it's harder and harder to get the old growth lumber, which is really where the benefit to that type of wood is. I mean, old growth redwood it's extremely strong for how heavy it is, and it's already got amazing water or characteristics to defend itself against water and rot and bugs. It's a very superior wood product to use.
That's awesome. So, and then that makes a lot of sense. And so we were talking about that, and it's funny, up here especially, there's, I'll tell you this, I found it on Audible, but I'm sure it's available other places as well. There's an old podcast it's from like a public radio station in Oregon, and it's called Timber Wars, and it's about the Redwood Summer and such, there's a lot of like institutional PTSD up here, almost you could call it, from that. I mean,
I believe that was the case where somebody camped up in a redwood for many months.
There was a bomb that went off at the end. Like it got like violent. Like this was, I think, so if I don't want to bastardize it too much, but it's like that's when, so Maxim Corporation, which owned the magazine, they bought Palco, and they went from what was a much more sustainable logging practices, thinking through generations to much shorter term, and that expedited or put pressure on the conservationalist community, and which led to people camping in trees. And
Right.
I actually don't remember the story, but I remember that there was a car bomb that went off. I don't remember which side.
Yeah,
But
I read about that.
and then there's people died, camping. So it got ugly, right? And but anyway, Timber Wars is a really good podcast, and you can they recorded it recently, I think 4 or 5 years ago, and you can hear the frustration in some of the old logging guys'
Definitely.
voices still. So and you get some of that around here too. But so anyway, that's why. So that's part of why there's no commercial harvesting of old growth redwood.
That's part of it. Yep.
So that makes it fascinating. So anyway, so so you started working with lumber. You build a shelf, build a bookshelf, and then but you don't just build bookshelves out. You take it more serious.
Yeah,
You're pretty into
I've
it.
taken several classes now. I would say I'm in a intermediate woodworker. I could build all sorts of different projects at this point. Actually, you spend 2 years doing something like that, and you can learn a lot. So for those of you that want to try and do your own projects, I'd recommend it. You can save yourself a lot of money learning how to build stuff in your own house. If you could do your own construction, that'll save you a good amount of money over the course of your life.
Seriously, yeah, absolutely. Especially right now with the costs of labor right now.
Yeah.
So that got you interested in that, and then you're an analyst by day, working in RIA, so naturally started getting interested in some of the lumber stocks and stuff. But one thing I wanted to tell the viewership about, we're interested in physical metals, or physical commodities here
Right.
on Real Assets Weekly. We had a landman on a couple of weeks ago, a friend of the show, Pescadero Energy, Ryan Cobb, and he brokers minerals, so he brokers oil, gas, lithium, I guess all kinds of stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But so you yourself are interested in physical commodities, and so I thought that was interesting. You went out and purchased, something like 170 acres up here, and what led to that? Like, why did you do that? It seems like a big undertaking.
Well, so the property's in a little place in California called Weyerhaeuser, which is in Siskiyou County, and the prices on land there have been absolutely collapsing, and they went under $1,000 an acre. And I viewed the property, and I could see just visually that I could get more than $500 an acre off of wood of commodities wood without any real problem. So it's not just a direct cost to cost thing, because you got to consider how much what the expenses are going to be to remove all the wood. But I mean, I could just visually see that it was going to be worth a lot more than the amount of wood that's on the mountain. And so for me, it was a no-brainer. It was a value decision. It's an undervalued piece of land, and there's only so much lower that the price of lumber is going to go. We're in an inflationary market. Things are moving in the upward direction, and I think they're going to continue to. So in the 10 years down the road, I'd expect that you could probably make a 200 to 300% profit just on the trees alone.
Wow. And it's a sustainable business in a lot of ways. I mean, so every year your inventory is growing.
That's right. There's 3 different methods that where you appreciate when you buy timberland. One is the property can appreciate over time, as it naturally would. The second is that the price per board foot typically goes up over time as well. And then actually there's a third one would be that the trees continue to grow and they get bigger and bigger each year. And then I guess the fourth one would be, as they get bigger, they actually command a higher price point per board foot as they get more mature. So you got 3 or 4 different things working for you to make money in that circumstance. And then there's other opportunities, potentially doing things like real estate investment trusts and other tax beneficial investing opportunities that you wouldn't even really consider in this analysis, but which do have possibilities.
Like selling to a REIT maybe, or...
Yeah, or like listing the whole thing as a REIT and paying any investors out the 90% profits you need to do in order to get tax breaks. Just a thought, but there's certainly some other opportunities involved in it.
Dude, that would be pretty gangster. Sometimes on FinTwit, you see threads about which companies do you think will be around in 100 years? And what's funny is, like, I've seen this thread multiple times, or some iteration of it, and you see the timber REITs on there, Weyerhaeuser, and I've seen other timber REITs listed on those lists. Do you think that's fair? Do you think that's a fair assumption that these are sturdy, almost should be permanent businesses?
I would say so. I mean, the first thing you got to consider, the lumber industry is not going anywhere. Some of the companies may change within the lumber industry, but it's not going anywhere.
Right.
People are going to still build houses, and so the lumber industry is always going to have a value. So as long as Weyerhaeuser isn't bought by another company, I could still see it being around in 100 years.
Yeah.
I believe it's probably been already around for
I
about
think it's
that
been around,
long.
yeah, since 1800.
So it is a definitely long-lived industry, and I think they've probably gotten past their worst point. And if you remember, in the mid-2000s with the financial crisis, lumber prices just collapsed, and a lot of those companies were losing a ton of money.
Yeah. No, right. So that's my understanding is, like, it's a good business for a long time. You know, it's had it cyclical, of course, like any commodity business. But since '08, it's not been a good business. And really since '08, or since the GFC, these stocks have not done great. But, you know, they got a good cash flow. I mean, like Weyerhaeuser, for example, it's been a pretty steady, dividend payer.
Yeah, that's what you get from those companies, are steady dividends and hopefully steady dividend growth. However, the whole, I keep going back to the engineered wood, but that could certainly rejuvenize a lot of, the growth within the industry. So that's definitely something that's going to keep the longevity of the business around. And as you mentioned, in terms of stocks, I think we were talking about this earlier, there's only so much higher they're going to be able to get than the price of lumber, how much they're earning per share. It's not like your tech companies, which can go 20, 30 times earn, or 20, 30 times sales.
There's not a lot of meanness to the lumber industry so much.
So it's one of those ones where you got to buy low, get in while the price is good, and then hold on and sell it when the price goes up, as they say.
Yeah. And it's, on that, it's been interesting because you've got, so during COVID, you had the price of lumber collapse so lumber went to what, $200 per board foot or something?
Yeah.
Or 2,000 board foot?
And then bundle.
Yeah, and then it went to about $1,500, right? During the peak of COVID.
Shot up, and now it's
back to about 500, a little over 500.
So it went up about 300%, then it retraced quite significantly, and now it looks like it's just kind of flatlining. And you'd hope if you're in the lumber industry that it will then go up again. If you're in the industry of buying wood, you probably hope it doesn't.
Right. And that's interesting. So we'll talk about some of the names in the supply chain, but so some of these guys are commodities, like you said, are a cost, and some of them commodities are income, or a profit. But in general, so we're back to about 550 and you think that which is on a long-term average, not too far from average, right? Like
no, not very far at all. I'd say it's still quite low, actually.
Yeah.
Considering where things were just a few years back.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So you've got leading factors, like key leading factors would be like housing starts. I've seen guys plot like ISM manufacturing next to these timber stocks, and that's a pretty good best guess. And so that's what's interesting. So we've had you had a 66% pullback, right? 1,500, we went back to about. We went under 500. We went to about 400, and then we're kind of back up.
And then we're back, yeah.
And housing, home builders have been ripping. They're some of the best performing stocks. These timber stocks, not so much, right? They've kind of gotten beat up.
Yeah.
And some of them, it's more than others. Like BCC, we're going to talk about it a little bit. That's done pretty well. Some better than the others, but.
Yeah, they've gotten beaten up, and it's kind of typical anytime that there's a potential for a recession or something, that the home builders and the wood product manufacturers just get taken out back and annihilated.
Yeah.
Part of the cycle for them.
Right, absolutely. So with that, we're going to take a little break. Boom.
They're paying up the yin-yang to buy carbon dioxide because they don't have enough in supply.
Well, they're paying up the yin-yang for the carbon dioxide or for the carbon credits?
No, for carbon dioxide.
Why?
Because there's a shortage.
What?
Isn't that fucking crazy?
This sounds like Earth is 3,000 years old type thing. What do you mean there's a shortage? How is there a shortage of carbon? How does that make sense?
Because, I mean, what we produce and put out in the atmosphere doesn't necessarily get captured. So in order to make carbon dioxide, you gotta, like, brew fucking beer and capture the carbon dioxide and put it in a tank.
What?
Shit like that.
So,
Or make liquid carbon dioxide.
So Oxy is... So part of why Buffett's buying Oxy... Buffett's buying Oxy.
Yeah,
like he's buying up shares. So
he's gonna buy the company.
It looks like, yeah. In part, because he had that pref that he got the deal when they did the... Anadarko deal wouldn't have got done without Buffett, right? So you got these preferred shares.
In like 2015,
yeah.
Right at the bottom.
Yeah. And so part of why he's so interested is because of this direct air capture technology, right? Is my understanding. Okay. So I guess Weyerhaeuser... Am I saying that right or no? Weyerhaeuser. Yeah. Are you
like Weyerhaeuser?
So I guess they're partnering with Oxy. So basically the idea is they're going to take this carbon that they get out of the air. So the direct air capture, so what's so interesting about that, why that's such a game changer could be, is because it negates having to, be so conscious with emitting carbon, right? Because if you emit, if you can capture it out of the ground, or excuse me, if you can capture it out of the air, then you don't have to worry about emitting it in the first place.
Exactly, right.
So I guess Weyerhaeuser is, a play on that because, or is involved in that because Oxy is injecting the carbon it captures out of the air beneath the earth on Weyerhaeuser land.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I've heard about them doing this. Apparently, cement releases a ton of carbon dioxide when it's poured and all this stuff. And apparently, they're using that same carbon capture to pump the carbon back into the cement because it makes it stronger, something like that. So, just another food for thought tidbit.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating, and I think that's to me, that's why real assets are so interesting because. We get the stock, so the market is irrational and it's a voting machine versus weighing machine, blah, blah, blah. And you get these crazy, like we talked about before. Look, you can only you're not going to get to 100x revenues in a timber stock. Like no one cares that much about timber. It's pretty boring. It doesn't have a memeability like Rivian or what's Lordstown or something. However, it's not going to get too disconnected from its real asset price, from its tangible book value, whether it's to the upside or to the downside. And so that is, so if you can buy it at a discount to NAV or something, you can actually, you might actually realize it, where with something that doesn't have as much tangible value, you probably won't.
Wood products, like possibly from just I don't even know.
Yeah.
But they make extracts.
Extracts, got it. Yeah. So, okay. So let's talk about what you own when you own a timber REIT or company. I mean, it doesn't have to be a REIT, but let's just it seems like a lot of them are owned the REIT structure. Is LPX a REIT or is that a C corp?
I don't know.
I forgot actually.
I haven't.
They might be a C corp.
I haven't done enough research on LPX.
Okay. Yeah. So, but okay, the big ones like Weyerhaeuser, West Fraser is the big Canadian mill. They're a big mill company mostly, but they also own a bunch of assets, I believe.
Yeah.
Rayonier, PCH. Is PCH a pure play on forestry, or is that also like a potlatch? I don't know, because the company is
PCH.
You know that stock, PCH?
Yeah, I feel like they do a mix of different things. That's why you gotta separate those pure plays from.
Yeah. So I mean, really, the pure play is RYN, WY, and maybe BCC.
Yeah, they're a pure play in engineered wood for sure.
Okay, so let's talk about them because that's something you like. I think you own the stock.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I actually think that engineered wood isn't anywhere near as cool as commodities wood, but that's where the money is.
Why? So tell me more. Why do you think that?
It's kind of just a bunch of wood that's just mashed up in a thing.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, when I go to the shop, I like to check out wood and kind of move it around. Some, like, for example, there's some hardwoods that are dark in color that have like holographic type things going on that are super cool. You don't see that in engineered wood. And then there's also like figured wood, like there's bird's eye maple. You got all sorts of crazy figuring in maple and other things that you just aren't going to be able to replicate. Or you can replicate it technically, but you're not going to find that in engineered wood.
Yeah.
So, I mean, engineered wood is the future. It's where the growth is at, but honestly, I'm not quite as interested in that as I am the commodities, because they're way cooler products.
No, totally. I hear what you're saying. So the growth is in, that's what people are excited about engineered wood, but that doesn't mean that. But as a woodworker, you like getting your hands on regular
wood, so I can take that wood and put it through the machines and flatten it and get it to.
But you're not building skyscrapers.
No, not building skyscrapers.
So, okay, and so what do you like about Boise Cascade? Because they're essentially a pure play on the engineered wood.
They are a pure play on the engineered wood, and you can see the results in front of your face. Like, they went from earning 50 cents a share a few years back to now like $16.24 a share in earnings. I mean, that's ridiculous. They should be at, based on that, they should be at like $150 a share, and they're sitting at like 90 something.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that alone tells me they probably got another 50% to go ahead of them.
Yeah, 7.5 billion, 7.5 billion market cap, 4.5% dividend. They something like a 33% free cash flow yield. And does yours taste like a blonde? I feel like I'm drinking an IPA here. I think she messed up our beers.
Oh, did she?
It's okay though. It's fine. I'm happy with it. Tastes like blonde, IPA or blonde?
Mine tastes like an IPA.
Okay. I can just make sure. So yeah, but so at 50, so at $500 per 1,000 board feet, this is a very profitable business. Because that's
at 500 per 1,000 board feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's that much. I mean.
Yeah. So you mentioned BCC is basically commodities are a cost for them. Commodity prices are a cost for them. So do they? If we go back to $750 per 1,000 board foot, is that a problem for them?
Yeah, it is somewhat. So when the commodities, if you remember when that index was going up to like 1,500, their stock price was starting to go down then, because that meant they were that was going to be eating into their costs a little bit.
Versus Weyerhaeuser, that would be like a call option for them.
That would be something benefit.
They're good. They're happy with that.
Yeah, they're happy with that. So, but I guess you're talking about a spread really, because Boise Cascade is also harvesting their own timber, and so they have like those kind of costs going too. But then they buy it as well, so it's like one of those difference between the 5 and 10 year treasury sorts of things.
Okay.
As the spread widens, they can make a ton of money, but then if the spread closes, that door shuts quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you are long BCC.
Long BCC. I bought them at like, let me say like 39 a share. They're at like 90 something now, but it's been a couple years.
Okay.
It's not like that's over 1 year, but it's good for like damn good for 2 years, I'd say.
Yeah, and you're long and strong. You think it's going a lot higher. You're bullish.
I'm bullish.
You think we're structurally short housing in the United States?
We are short housing. We're not necessarily short wood. That's one of the things. Like our forests in this country have done a really good job actually of being replenished since like I'd say they were like. I mean, if you look at what our forest resources were like in the 1930s or something, like we didn't have shit for forests left, and now we have a ton of forests because they've been managed correctly. So we actually are looking good in terms of the amount of wood that we can pull out, but like people aren't tearing the wood out like they used to.
Right.
Like they're being way more
sustainable.
They're not like because I mean you rip all the wood out of an area, you're hurting your own future.
Yeah,
20
the
years
hippies
down.
won the Redwood Summer.
Yeah.
That's the end of the podcast. The hippies won, more or less.
Totally.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I'm talking about the Timber Wars podcast, not our podcast.
Yeah, no, the Timber Wars.
Yeah.
The one where the bombs were blowing people up.
Yeah, right. They won the bombs. That was the final victory. I don't know actually. I gotta look at the story of the bombs. I forgot what
the
happened.
bomb. I remember that one. It was like it was a car bomb, and I think like it blew up in the back, and both the guys in the front were fine, something like that. I think.
So,
are we on the podcast?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. No, Ebert Capital does not support any bombing of any.
Yeah.
Okay, and any other stocks you think are worth following in the I mean, they're all pretty interesting stocks to mention. I mean, there's a paper, I sent it to you.
I think that the one you were mentioning earlier, Rainier,
yeah,
they're
RYN.
very interesting. Very interesting. They have those, I think their company's split into two different businesses. So their forest products one is good, but they actually have a chemistry side to them too, which is, I'm not going to even talk about it because I don't exactly know what they're doing, but
yeah,
they have, they're essentially looking for like technology and wood pulp, that sort of thing. So
there's a paper, it's called, I'm going to look it up here. It's, come on. But basically the gist is international paper is an excellent canary with regards to the real economy. And because international paper is essentially mostly at this point a cardboard company, which, who uses a lot of cardboard is FedEx, right? And
so I'm talking about
packaging and Amazon, right? And yeah, exactly. The paper's called Stock Prices in the U.S. Lumber Supply Chain, a Granger Causality Analysis. But, point being is that these lumber stocks in general, they're an excellent canary, and that's why it's something I think is really worth following, and that's why I think Tristan's somebody to talk to. He knows a lot. Not only does he live here on the Redwood Coast, the Lost Coast, up here in lumber country, but he also he follows the stocks. He works with wood himself, and there's some interesting. I think so. If we can keep with this secular, kind of shortage of housing stock in this country, I think you have a bid. I think millennials need houses, right? That's the problem. We need more houses, and houses are built with wood, or the frames are at least. And for that reason, if we could stay above $500 per 1,000 board feet, you can make a great living, or you can make, Weyerhaeuser pays something like a 2.5% dividend, but that's $25 billion market cap, Weyerhaeuser. But that's not including the special dividend, which takes it above 5. And so,
interesting.
Yeah. So
special dividends have been actually a big one for Boise Cascade because their dividend it's very low. It's like 16 cents or something like that. But then, every quarter, they're paying out another, $2 to $3 dividend, special dividend, because they're raking in the cash. So they're sending it back out to their shareholders. So I think this is a great time right now to expect cash inflows from your investments in the timber stocks.
Yeah. That's cool. So let's we'll definitely keep an eye on those. And I think that what we've everyone's talking about this recession that's coming, and the home builders have been like we said earlier, the home builders have been extremely strong, and the timber stocks have really gotten off the mat here as of recently. So it's something we'll continue to monitor. Last thing I wanted to ask you about was the lumber to gold stuff. Did you I forgot, you said you took a look at that briefly? Or?
Took a look at it. I haven't actually done
Michael Guyad,
yeah. So I guess what he's saying is that there should be some sort of a correlation between the price of lumber and the price of gold.
So most are the ratio of the price of lumber to gold.
Ratio.
That ratio breaks down, it's tended to precede pullbacks in the financial markets, but then in real economy as well.
Well, I think that makes sense. What I've always been more interested in terms of economic indicators is the short-term interest rates, because those directly affect how much money, a company like, your Weyerhaeuser or Boise Cascade can pull out in order to buy these commodities, in order to fund their operations. Right. And so I feel like these short-term interest spikes that we're seeing from the Fed are, kind of a little bit have been problematic for these companies in terms of being able to organize their cash flows and that sort of thing. And I do wonder if they continue to raise short-term interest rates, if we're going to end up getting some sort of maybe a sell-off in commodities prices.
Right. Well, and but that's also the bull case, I think, right, is that, talk about interest rates, mortgages have gone from 3 to 7 in a couple of years, and the housing stock, the house prices really haven't pulled back much.
Well, that's a good point.
Right. And I think that
they're strong.
Right. And I think when you think about housing prices, here's what's interesting. You have the existing housing stock, right, which, remember, something like 95% of homeowners have a mortgage under 5%. right? And take one more step back. Think about this. The United States of America is where you get a 30-year mortgage. If you go to Canada, you go to Mexico, you go to even the United Kingdom, my understanding is that not everybody has 30-year mortgage is not ubiquitous like it is here.
That's
right?
Interesting.
Yeah. So
Did not know
95% of the United States housing stock has a mortgage locked in at under 5%. The new mortgage is 7%. But with that said, there's still I live in Southern California primarily, and people are still paying over ask for housing stock in Southern California, where I'm at. And so the point is that there is this secular shortage. So the home builders really represent new housing stock. Existing housing stock is different, right? It doesn't really turn over much, and that's been part of the problem.
That's right.
We've had a lot of record low volumes in housing transactions, and so and so I think that's really all. These are all tailwinds. These are supportive to the commodity price, the demand side of the picture for Weyerhaeuser and for these other these owners of these assets.
Yeah, certainly.
And Tristan here, who owns the guy, no big deal, 100-something acres up here in NorCal. When you own, and that's so back to the FinTwit thread thing. I mean, that's what's so interesting. It's like when you own a lumber REIT, what you really own is you own you own stock that is growing, right? Because this asset is growing while you sleep.
Yeah, all it needs is water and sun.
Right, it's kind of fascinating. So cool. What else, Tristan? No, that's.
Well, we were discussing. I think we were discussing earlier about mineral rights. And what kind of rights
Let's talk about that.
get. So when I purchased, one thing you got to make sure when I purchased my TPZ property, also zoning is an important one. But generally, like you need to produce either an ag property or a TPZ. That's California. But
hold on. What's TPZ stand for?
Timber producing zone.
Hey, all right.
Yeah,
TPZ
timber
property.
production zone.
So it could be ag, which would be what? That would be like if you had. Like if you're gonna grow dope on it.
I mean, growing, but actually some of tree harvesting is included in the ag.
Okay, if it was Christmas tree farm.
Oh yeah, for sure. I guess the thing you got to designate between is like single family housing. They do have that designation in terms of like what it's what that piece of property is there for. So you're not going to be able to do a timber producing zone in a single family housing thing. So you got to make sure, obviously, that you're buying the right parcel. Okay. But then I made sure, one of the things I made sure was to make that there was going to be the rights to the trees. Yeah. That was going to be included because some of these properties do sell them separately. You can actually buy the land separate from the ability to manage the forest. Right. Yeah. Right. So that's something that very important to look into, because if you end up buying a piece of property and then you're up there, cutting down your own trees, you might end up getting the previous owner giving you a cease and desist order, which not the thing you want to deal with.
Suboptimal. So you so basically you want to be very careful that you have mineral rights to harvest. And exactly. I forgot if I told you this story, but I definitely didn't say it on the podcast, was a realtor buddy was talking to me about somebody local here in a nice part of town. And what this guy did, he came in, bought 2 lots on a hill, harvested the wood, made something like 85-90% of his purchase price harvesting the wood, selling it to the mill, and then built 2 houses on the 2 lots. And so that would be, you'd have to have the zoning. That would be a single family housing zoning, clearly.
For sure. And I would check based on where you buy the property as to what the rules are for cutting down all the trees as well. So but it depends on the city you're in.
Yeah. And so TPZ, what if our young lumber speculators in the audience, what do they need to know about TPZ zoning?
Well, TPZ is going to be designated for very large plots of land. Traditionally, these are going to be ones you're not going to just be able to pull up off a main highway and find, although sometimes they will be. But they're going to be properties that are designated for harvesting trees, and so that's where you're going to find the lumber companies. That's where you're going to find all of your investors in terms of wood and wood assets is going to be in these TPZ properties. Ag has a lot of restrictions on being able to take out trees, although you can certainly do harvests on them. But it's not. Typically with a TPZ, you'd have a harvest plan that would be approved by, I'm assuming the county or the state, I'm not 100% sure which body it is. And you're actually expected to maintain it on this basis. They want you to cut those trees. They want you to maintain this property so that it's less of a fire risk, so that you're, I'm not exactly sure how it benefits them, but they want you to do this. Yeah, tax money. There you go.
Do you have a harvest plan yourself?
No, the property actually came with its own timber harvest plan, which I haven't looked into. But I should look into that a bit more, because it'd be nice to not have a timber harvesting service up on my property without me knowing. So, yeah, that's...
we talk about these degens speculating on options without doing their due diligence, but you're speculating on large percentages of timber.
But that's... generally, the harvest plan isn't necessarily something that they're going to hold you to.
Okay.
But they expect you to at least harvest under these.
And so you 170 acres, you're probably not going to go out there with an axe and chop it down yourself, or you might. You are a woodworker.
Not an axe, but a chainsaw, and then, got to have some way to move the logs into the right area so it can be transported, possibly with an ATV. And this is kind of where the logistics come in, because there's one of the things that's interesting about harvesting lumber is you harvest a bunch of Doug fir, and it's not just going to go to a random mill somewhere. It's going to go to a specific mill somewhere, possibly a state away or 2 states away, and you got to transport it 7 or 8 hours to go to this facility that takes Douglas fir, and then you got your cedar, and you might have to take that to another facility, which is 7 hours in the other direction. So
really, 7 hours?
I mean, I don't know for sure, but a lot of these things are very highly spaced around because they do a lot of sawing out of just a few mills. Right. So one of the things that people are doing these days is they're actually doing their own mill operation. You bring in a portable mill. They're one of the companies that makes these things is Weyerhaeuser.
Whoa.
Yeah, and so they have bandsaws, and you can come in, you can cut your logs into the right size. A lot of them have hydraulic lifts and can do a lot of work. And you can cut these products yourself and possibly even run them through a planer, a jointer to improve the value on it. And so there's a real market in being a personal lumber miller these days. I actually see people on YouTube that make a living off of it. And so that's another resource if you want to get into this. You can harvest your own trees and harvest your own wood and possibly make a significant amount of money, more than you would if you were trying to own a company or do it, be employed in a company doing it.
Wow, that's fascinating. So you don't. So let's say it's $500 per 1,000 board feet. That's once you get it to the mill. Right? So you harvest this wood, then you have to transport it, and then you get $500 per 1,000.
That's correct. Yeah, you got to eat out. There's some costs that you got to eat up during that.
And so 500. Do you study the contract that what is it, FSB or whatever? Do you study or do you look at that futures contract? Is that something you spend a lot of time thinking about?
No, not really, because I haven't actually sold any lumber. But I mean, at the point where you're actually ready to saw some trees, you could certainly either buy or sell a futures contract and lock in your prices.
You could hedge it out.
So,
but you have to. So if you have to transport it, you have to build in transport costs, which are probably significant.
And the harvesting costs and all that. They generally take big tractor type machines, expensive machines, and they run them up on the property and get them up into areas where a car or a truck can't go. And then they do some harvesting up there, and it's tedious. There's a lot of labor involved. It's not cheap, so that's one of the things you got to consider when doing all this. Is if you're going to try and employ people, there's a lot of cost, a lot of insurance cost associated with it. Whereas if you try and do it yourself, you can actually, it's your own labor. You can possibly make, all your own money and get your own insurance for that. So it's nothing that I've actually done myself, but I do feel like there's an opportunity in being an independent miller, independent wood miller.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, and so back to the 3 ways to make money: appreciating speculating on physical timberlands, not that this is investment advice or we're condoning this, but if you were to speculate on physical timberlands, you can make money on the property itself appreciating, the price per board foot appreciating, so that's the contract, the futures contract, or you could just speculate on CME contract. Or you wait as every year, markets go up, markets go down, you have more board feet, as long as there's not a fire.
Exactly.
And even actually, let's talk about that. I mean, that was fascinating. One point you told me before we were live here in the was that these fires that come through. Talk about that a little bit. So even if there is a fire, that doesn't necessarily always mean it ruins your product completely.
So it doesn't always mean that. The fires that we've been getting over the last 10 years have been extremely hot, and they've been fueled by a lot of dead wood, and they've been so hot that they've killed the trees. But generally speaking, in a lot of our fire seasons, the fires don't get quite that hot, and they do some external damage to the trees, and the trees can actually recover from that and have extremely high growth rates after that. For example, western red cedar and incense cedar are known to, and actually ponderosa pine they're considered secondary tree species because they pop up after a fire of a primary tree species, like Douglas fir would be, once those guys burn down, then you got, your ponderosa pines and other,
So Douglas fir morphs into ponderosa pine, like a caterpillar turns into a butterfly?
No, it's
no.
It's the Douglas fir would get burned to death, whereas the ponderosa would they'd be in the mix there.
Okay.
Because the trees, there will be a ponderosa and then a Doug fir and a spruce, and so the Doug fir and the spruce might not make it, but the ponderosas will take over from there, and that's when you're in a ponderosa forest and it's nothing but ponderosas, mature ponderosas. There's likely been a major fire that went through there at some point.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so. Okay, that's fascinating. What resources, do you follow any, podcasts, books, movies, shows? What can we, if our audience is interested in timber, lumber, aside from finding Tristan Caswell on?
That's a good point. I have a few resources. I generally look a lot of stuff up on Google, but in terms of people that I subscribe to or pay attention to their YouTube channels, so I got a person that I like in construction. It's I'm not sure if I can just start naming names.
Please do. Yeah.
Matt Reisinger, he's great. He if you watch his construction videos, they're very educational. He'll teach you, how new methods of construction are improved over old methods.
And so how do you spell Reisinger? R-I or what?
R-I-S-I-N-G-E-R.
And so he's like an architect?
He's a construction, he's a builder, so he works with architects, but he's the guy that builds the actual building. That's, a lot of the reason I know a lot of the things that I do about engineered wood is because of watching his videos, actually. I didn't actually know anywhere near as much before watching them. And then another person that I'm watching is a guy called Carl Pask. Pask he's a woodworker / I think he does so many different things, concrete work and all sorts of different work. And he's a fascinating individual, but I don't actually have any YouTube follow or people that I'm following on YouTube or Instagram or anything like that from the woodworking industry. So
what's the one? I'm trying to find this YouTube channel that I follow. One's called, I think, Lumber Exchange. This guy, Ashley, I follow this guy on Twitter, Ashley Bennett.
I think I might know the lumber. Is
here, I'm trying. My internet does not work here. Great.
No, I think I know the lumber. Is it an Arizona guy?
No, this one is. But I think he's got a couple partners. This is not great television here. Ashley. Okay, here it is. Ashley Buckholt. Boekholt. I'll send. One's called.
No, there you go. That looks cool.
Here, let's find him on Twitter. But Ashley Buckholt 2x4. He follows me on Twitter. He's a social media influencer, lumber industry change agent, and a consultant. But anyway, those guys have a great show. They call it. Here it is. The lumber market this week. Look at this dude. That's a real man right there, dude. I love, dude, these lumber. This guy, that's him, dude.
Yeah.
I love, dude. Lumber is fascinating. I mean, like
Very fascinating.
not because I was a lumberjack mascot in college. Like I've just been fascinated with the industry, and like it used to be like they talk about in the PBS show or the public radio show that I referenced called Timber Wars. You know, the lumberjack is like Americana, right? It's like the ultimate like man. It's the grizzly man. It's like he goes out, he goes and chops down trees and brings them back. Like there's nothing manlier than that. And yeah, with that, so I think I think they're fascinating assets. Again, back to the FinTwit thing, I think there's reasons to believe you can own these for many, many years. And it's something that, again, there's a canary in the coal mine of the real economy, whereas Eric Basmajian, like I always mention, lumber or real estate is the economy, and this is a key input in these real estate stocks. So, or in these in the real estate the supply of housing itself. And so, for that reason, I think it's an interesting barometer to watch. Tristan, been a great guest on the show. Tristan, the guy really knows his stuff. We'll hopefully talk to him again here. And with that, thanks for listening to Real Assets Weekly. Tristan, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I just appreciate the time that you've given me. I appreciate being on the podcast.
Yeah.
You gave me the time too. So I think it's good. I think you got a real winner on your hands with this podcast. I'd like to hear a lot more of it.
Yeah, man. Oh, thanks. That means a lot. So that's with that, we'll talk to you guys soon. Real Assets Weekly. Have a great week.